Was around using ChatGPT or AI in general to help write resumes for job applications. I'm using ChatGPT. It's the one that I fell into, I guess. I found it to be the most useful so far. I am paying for a subscription that allows me to have more interactions with it. I think it saves more information about me specifically based on my previous chats. I don't think it's necessary. You can do all this without paying for a subscription. I use it for much more than just my resume writing, so I found it useful. Okay, so prompt writing, I have pulled up a chat that we've had, and we'll kind of go through the decisions that I've made as I go through the chat. For prompt writing, I have found it most successful to use the as a blank prompt here as a copywriter and resume specialist. And then I ask very verbosely what I'm looking for. Review this job description and identify the top 10 items that are valuable for the job and valuable for the job poster, or to the job poster. So very specifically, let's take a step back to act as a, so my understanding is this helps the AI put on the resume specialist hat. This helps focus what it's looking for and how it's executing this, because conceivably it would execute this a little bit differently if the prompt was as a mechanical engineer, right? Review this job description. It's going to be looking for different things. It's going to be processing a little bit differently. I've not done a whole lot of side-by-side comparisons. Execute one request as a copywriter and execute one request as a HR specialist. But I have found good results, not measured results, but good results using this format. And it seems like it does better in this format than it does without, based on my limited experience. Second is be verbose in your expectations. Here, it's not just tell me the important parts of the job description. It is verbose. Review the job description, identify the top 10 items that are valuable for this job and valuable to the job poster. The top 10, I'm asking for a specific number. If I just say, give me some important items, likely it will give me 2 or 3, and I want more than 2 or 3. If I say give me a lot or give me more, right, it's just easier to give it a number. I could make this 15, I could make it 20, depending on how much I want to interact and how many of these items I want. If I make it too many, if I say 50, likely what it will do is it will give me 10 and then wait for me to prompt for the next 10. High numbers and high calculations tend to be a little bit more difficult in this space. 10, 15 shouldn't be an issue. And then I go on to explain what important items are, because I use the moniker, 10 items that are valuable for the job and valuable for the job poster. And then I go to explain what important items are. They're mentioned or referenced multiple times, and they play a large role in the life of the organization or the company. Again, I could be more verbose here, explain what a large role in the life of the organization or company is. At some point, I just kind of throw prompts out and see how they respond. And if I'm not getting the responses I want, I can go back and edit them. Take the process on yourself. Here is my notes for this video, but here is also my process that I'm doing, right? I have a job description, I have a resume, and there's an option to make, in this kind of process, there's an option to make a long resume, like a 5 or 10 page resume with detailed points about everything that you've ever done, right? It's going to take some time to gather all that information up, but giving that to AI might be just as easy or easier in the long run than giving it, the short 2-page, 1-page resume and building on it every time you have a new job posting. Just a side note. So I'm owning this process and I'm walking the AI through this process myself. I found if I try and get it to go through these steps on its own, there's not as much quality control on my side. I don't have the ability to review specific responses. And then we get down to step 6 or 7, and it's giving me some wacky information or wacky questions that don't really apply. So I found it useful to kind of set out a process, if not written down, at least in my head, and then walk it through step by step. Ask it to identify the 15 most valuable items, right? So that's what I'm doing here. I have the prompt here in the same space I give it the job posting. This is not necessary to give it the brackets, but it is a way that I have found to communicate with the AI, right? Here's the job posting, just copied in, plain text. It's got some funky formatting. AI doesn't seem to care much about that. And then kind of the close bracketing on the job posting. And then I ask for clarifying questions before executing the prompt. Nearly every time I find that I believe I'm giving clear instruction, and there's always some things that I've left out or some things that it can make assumptions on. And if I don't ask for clarifying questions, it will make assumptions, and it will give me information that maybe I'm not looking for or execute in a manner that I'm not looking for. Okay, so let's see what the response is. Thanks for sharing the job posting. Before I dive into the key points, can you clarify if there are specific areas you're looking to focus on, such as qualifications, responsibilities, or company culture? This will help tailor insights more closely to what you're looking for. This is a short, clarifying question. I usually get 3 questions, 6 questions, depending on how verbose or how many times I've done this before. And that's a good question, because what I posted in was information about the company, information about my day-to-day, and then qualifications, right? What we're looking for. So I responded, I'm looking to focus on responsibilities, the things that the job poster is looking for me to accomplish or be able to accomplish in this role. Simple. I could ask for more clarifying questions, and oftentimes it will give me more clarifying questions. At this point, I just want to kind of move forward and see what I get from this experience, from this practice. Great, here's the top 10 valuable responsibilities for the job posting based on how frequently they're referenced and their significance to the organization's transformation, right? And then when it gives this to me, I want to review it. Caveat, I did not review it in this one because I'm just trying to process through and give you an example of what we're working with. But I'd look through and I'd review this and I'd go, okay, championing and facilitating agile adoption. That makes sense. An agile role, a scrum master role, an agile coach role, that's what they would want, right? I know kind of a little bit about the role. I know what this means. Great. The job poster emphasizes the importance of adopting agile practices within the product teams. As the agile coach, you'll be tasked with guiding teams towards self-organization and continuous improvement. This is a major part of the PMI's transformation towards agile maturity. Great. That makes sense. I want to verify this kind of in my own head because I don't want it to identify like must work from 9 to 5 as a key item, right? It may mention that several times in the job posting. I don't care about that because I can do that. I don't have to prove that I can do that. Anyway, so I'm not actually reviewing a lot of these, but as I'm skimming through them, they seem to make sense. Leading agile ceremonies, utilizing agile tools. Okay, so it gives me 10 of them, and then it gives me kind of a outro of this response, and that checks off this third point here. So then I take that and I continue to walk it through my process. Identify what of those items are presently in my resume and which ones are lacking. Okay, here's the post or the response. Using those points, review my resume and identify which of these points are satisfied in my resume. I'm seeking to make it clear that I'm able to execute on these items through the points in my resume. For each item that is satisfied, here's getting verbose and explaining what I'm looking for, and part of this is for my information, and part of this is to double check that it's not making stuff up, right? For each item that's satisfied, reference specific lines from my resume. Also identify what items are not satisfied and or could use some additional support through my resume. So here's the resume. I copied it over from the Word, right? This isn't formatted great, but it knows what's going on. AI, ChatGPT knows what's going on. And then close bracket. I've also done this using like between, right, the star marks, right, and then I'll put information, right, and then I'll close it out with more star marks or whatever. This seems to be a little bit more clear in my mind. Okay, I asked for clarifying questions. Thanks for providing the resume. Before diving into analysis, I have a couple of clarifying questions. What level of detail are you looking for, right? Are you interested in suggestions on how to improve certain selections, right? This is what I want to do, but not in this space. If I said yes for number 2, my fear is that it's going to take on too much work and it's going to skip some important steps or some important identifying important information. So I've asked it not to do that. And I've asked it to focus on skills and examples that align with each responsibility rather than a high level match. Just what feels right to me. Thanks for the clarification. I'll go through and the key responsibilities listed, right? And it's doing what I've asked it to. Point number 1. And if I were to get a little detailed about this, I might go through and make sure that this point number 1 is the point number 1 from above. Generally, I trust it that far at least. Satisfied. Develop practical retrospective practice enabling the team to identify and act on improvement opportunities. Okay, then this demonstrates your ability. I go through and I go, okay, does this support this? Yeah, it does. Double the rate of sprint completion. Yeah, it supports it. Okay, needs support. Communicating agile adoption across broader organization. Right. So it's doing that for each of these points. And this is where we are. Identify what of those items are present in my resume and which ones are lacking. And I like, even though I didn't ask for this specifically, I like that it's giving opportunities for each of these items if I want to go deeper, where it sees opportunities here. For 10 points, I didn't ask for it, but it gave me a summary of satisfied points and then items that need additional support. Yeah, it's giving me, like, it's really encouraging. Mostly ChatGPT is very encouraging. Gives me a lot of like, good job and way to go and you're amazing, right? That's pretty standard. And there are ways to like parse that out so it doesn't respond that way, but I know at least that it doesn't actually think I'm a genius. That's just its habit, right? And then I carry it to step 5, right? Go through the items that are missing support one by one and prompt me for a personal success story that aligns with this item, as well as some brainstorming questions that help me think about how my experience applies to this item. Use our previous conversations to suggest some situations I can speak to. And this is, right, using all of these previous conversations that we've had, and several of them I've asked it to write some success stories or customer success stories for marketing, so it's gotten pretty deep into some of the situations that I've gone through. Prompt me with the first item, ask clarifying questions, and dig for more information. Do not prompt the next item until I tell you. Before executing this prompt, ask any clarifying questions. This is a tactic that I've picked up because what it's going to want to do is it's going to want to give me a few questions for each of these items because it knows how many things it's going through. And so it's going to want to give me like, here's 2 questions on number 8. Here's 2 questions on number 9, right? And kind of satisfy what it thinks the request is. And so I'm being explicit, and I say, dig for more information, and I'm saying, do not prompt the next item until I tell you to. This works 98% of the time. I've had it not work a couple times. And then ask clarifying questions, right? It's asking some clarifying questions. You can see here it's got some getting into some definitions of what agile transformations means, and some Miro tool experience. And this kind of tells me like it doesn't have any clarifying questions, but it's trying to satisfy the prompt. And so it's starting to get into this work down here where it's asking about what transformation means and what experience I have with Miro and that kind of stuff. So I answer it, and actually tell it, ask for more insight inside the specific item that as it pertains to the item. Right, and so that's a little bit of work, and here's where we get into what I believe is the real work. Right, this is your ability to identify and connect these items, but through ChatGPT's prompts. So let's start with the integration and PMI ecosystem. Since this point focuses on aligning agile practices and team operations with the broader ecosystem of the organization, I'd love to hear about your experience with cross-functional collaboration. Have you been in a situation where you had to integrate agile practices into a broader organizational framework? How did you ensure alignment with other areas of the business or organization? There's a prompt. Here's some brainstorming prompts. I mostly find these quite helpful because it allows me to like think of it from a different perspective. And then usually what I'll do here is I'll just list them out. 1, this is my thoughts on number 1, a shift return so that it doesn't submit. Right, 2, here is number 2, and then I'll just go on to the brainstorming prompts. Think about the situation, right? And I'll note, and sometimes I will write these out, and sometimes I will have it on my phone and just voice dictate as I tell a story about this situation. And then, right, if I don't find that these are helpful, I can even go in and ask like, hey, think about, or ask from the perspective of a developer who's seeking this information from their manager. It's probably a bad prompt or bad positioning, but you can ask it to go in and reframe these things or give you some examples, right? Give me some examples of times that maybe I have accomplished this. So that's where I stopped here, but as you can see, there's still some processing to do. Ask me one question at a time to give real experience success stories when I was able to accomplish these things. That's what we're doing here. That was the previous prompt. And then based on my success stories, give me 4 to 5 bullet options for each of these points that I could include in my resume. And I ask for 4 to 5 because it's going to give me 2, maybe 3 that are solid, and then the rest are just going to be kind of like filler. And then what I'll do is I'll select the items that I feel are most relevant or fit the best or whatever. I'll recraft my resume based on the suggested points that it gives me. And then I'll export it to PDF and I'll give it back to ChatGPT and I'll say, act as a copywriter, review my resume and give me 5 suggestions that you'd improve. And I do this instead of saying just fix my resume because I want to follow the items that it's suggesting. And I could ask for 10, I could ask for 15. I like to do 5 because I know that I could continue improving my resume ad infinitum, but eventually I want to get it out. Okay, what else? Yeah, supercharge options. Have GPT ask you about your success stories. Tell it to reference previous conversations. And that's what we talked about here. I could open up another prompt and say, you know, ask me or help me brainstorm about a time that I made my customer happy or whatever, right? Maybe a little bit more detailed than that, but that could be helpful. And then in this process here, I could say reference previous conversations. I could probably even say, reference previous conversations. Give me 3 times that I was successful in this space. I don't know what it's going to give me, and this is a little bit scary because it's going to respond live. If it doesn't break first. Yeah, Agile maturity model was something that I was doing at HP. It empowered teams to assess. Right, this is a great example. These are all conversations that I had had previous, and then questions to dig deeper. Anyway, so I can copy over the specific prompts that I gave it, so you can see what those prompts are instead of trying to copy them from the video. But hopefully this kind of talk through helps give a better understanding of at least how I'm using ChatGPT to do this. And I think there might be a way, as I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, I think there might be a way to say, like, act as a copywriter or act as a resume specialist or act as an HR placement specialist, right? And review this resume and give me a score for how well I'm qualified to do this. Review this job posting and give me a score for how well I'm qualified to do this job posting based on my resume and based on previous conversations. And then you might be able to run that through with 10 or 15 different job postings and kind of get an understanding for what you might be more qualified for or what might fit better. And that might save some time. Anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. And again, this is what I've found up until now. I'm sure I will discover more as I move forward. And I'm sure in 2 weeks, 25% of this is going to be less useful than it is right now. But I will continue growing and encourage you to continue exploring.